All right, hello everybody. Just wanted to upload a quick tutorial on the electrocardiogram. So this is going to look at ECGs and what ECGs look like. So here we have a standard cardiac cycle. During this cardiac cycle, we have different repolarizations and depolarizations that happen. Now the ECG is an electrocardiogram, and that is the electrical current that the heart uses to generate contractions and pump blood. First, we start off with our atrial depolarization. That is sending electrical impulse down through the atria. On the ECG, this is represented by the P wave. Next, we have what is termed the AV node delay. This happens at the atrioventricular node, which is in between the septum of the ventricle and the atria. It is going to delay the depolarization of the ventricles ever so slightly to allow for the atria to begin to relax and blood to fill the ventricles. Now, once we start the depolarization of the ventricles, we get the repolarization of the atria. So the start of the depolarization of the ventricle is the Q wave, the slight deviation or deflection in the opposite direction. Next, we have the full depolarization of the ventricles. That is the R wave. That is the deflection of electrical current all the way through the intraventricular septum and out along the cardiac wall. Then we have what is called the S wave. The S wave is the downward deflection and reverberation of that electrical signal back out up towards the atria. Finally, we have the ST segment. During the ST segment, we have ventricular contraction. Now keep in mind that atrial repolarization happens during the QRS complex. So the atria depolarize at the P wave, repolarize during the ventricular contraction, but it is masked by the QRS complex. So we do not see the atrial repolarization here. The ST segment is the time that the ventricles are contracting and the atria are relaxed. Finally, we have to repolarize the ventricles. In order to repolarize the ventricles, we have what is termed the T wave. So the final wave here, at the end of the cardiac cycle, the T wave indicates repolarization of the ventricles. And then we have full cardiac relaxation until the cardiac cycle begins again with the P wave. So during this portion, we have depolarization. Depolarization of the atria, the P wave, depolarization of the ventricles of the QRS, repolarization of the ventricles at the T, repolarization of the atria masked by the QRS complex. These areas down here dictate where that electrical impulse is and where it gets delayed. So we go from the SA node at the beginning. During the P wave, we reach the atrioventricular node, or the AN node. That is where we have the delay. So the signal is delayed inside of the node for a short period of time to allow the atria to contract and pump the blood into the ventricles. Next, we go through what are called the His fibers, or the bundle of His. Those separate down into bundle branches, and those bundle branches then conduct electrical signal through the walls of the ventricles during the QRS complex. And then finally, at the end of the electrical impulse, we see that we have depolarization of all of the ventricular fibers. So here's a standard ECG. What you will find is that it usually has a very large QRS deflection. Its P and T deflections are usually similar in height. The ST segment and the PQ segment are usually going to be somewhat similar as far as their duration is concerned. And we're going to have a relative frequency that is somewhat the same. So the amplitude of the QRS wave is going to be similar. The time between P wave to P wave is the interval that we're going to look at for the cardiac cycle. The RR interval is what we look at most as far as frequency and consistency of the heart rate. So on a normal ECG, we want to see this sort of a deflection on a frequent basis, getting up to maybe 3 or a little bit more positive millivolts at its highest, deflecting down to maybe negative 1/2 a millivolt at its lowest during repolarization. All right. So that is a tutorial on an ECG. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you at the next video.